Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey everybody, it's Jessa, and I'm back for another episode of the Better Sex Podcast, and I'm so glad you're here. Maybe you're back for another one too, or maybe this is your first time listening, but either way, I'm delighted that you've tuned in. Today's topic is interesting. I think about this. I have a lot of clients that talk about reading romance novels, and they end up getting turned on, because some of these are really well written and they respond to the stories, and it's this way that they have to sort of enter a sexual space and activate what I call their reactive sex drive. They may not feel spontaneous interest, but boy, once something starts to stimulate their body or their mind, there you go, and they're interested in sex. And my guest today, Thien-Kim has developed what she calls the Bawdy Bookworms, which is a subscription box that includes a romance novel or erotic fiction and a sex toy. And she's paired these together and she curates them and, sends them out to her audience, and then even has a book club and discussion, and, is really trying to facilitate exposure to this material and support for women. Not all women, but, a lot of women to explore their pleasure and to try sex toys that they maybe never would have tried or been open to. So it's really a fascinating conversation about how she got into this, how she chooses the things, how it works, and what she's learned. Hope you enjoy. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So Thien-Kim, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with how you got into this business. How and when did you decide to start this sort of erotic subscription?
Well, I've always enjoyed reading romance books. I started as probably in middle school, like way too young to be reading explicit novels, but I think that's when a lot of us are curious about sex and pleasure, and for me, that was one of the few ways I could learn about it was reading romance books. Especially, I was attracted to them because the women in there, they wanted sex, they wanted pleasure, and they found ways to get it, which is not something you see a lot in the media.
Yeah.
Especially, when I was younger.
Right.
And then, when I was in my 20s, I started selling sex toys in home parties. And it was like a whole new world. I thought, wow, how come no one ever told me this stuff? And along the way of trying out different vibrators, because we all have to do a little research.
Right. Home research.
I actually started to learn more about women's bodies and pleasure and how the things I experienced was normal. Things like not being able to achieve orgasm with penis and vagina sex.
Right.
Things like that. And I thought, other people need to know this stuff because we're not weird. This is all normal. And we have to learn what works for us. And about, I guess 3 years ago, I had this aha moment. I'm reading a romance book. There's some great sex scenes. It's emotional. It's exciting. And I thought wow, I get aroused by reading these. And I know my friends get aroused reading these. What if I provided the tools, right? You read the book and here are some products that will help you try out some of the things in the book.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I am not a romance novel reader. So do those portray female pleasure that way, that most of the women need clitoral stimulation, or do they, so much of TV and movies you don't see that, right? So I'm wondering, are romance novels different in that way, that they're a little bit more accurate and realistic?
They have evolved a lot. So if you go back, a lot of times when people talk about romance books, they kind of talk down to it. And they call them bodice rippers, or they say they're very rapey. And if you go back to the 70s and 80s and probably even early 90s, a lot of the romance books are kind of like that, because I think that was just indicative of the time. You found a woman found a man who had everything she needed, but she didn't know quite yet, and he had to quote unquote convince her, right? And now, I took a long break reading romance books when I was in college because I didn't have time. When I came back, I noticed that a lot of the ones I read, for those that are the heterosexual romances, the men always gave women oral first before they had any other sexual interaction.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, this is cool. Like, this is new. So I'm seeing more and more, and maybe it's the books that I choose to read. It's because it's a really wide genre, but I see more and more where the male partner gives the female partner an orgasm before he has one, or they have penetrative sex.
Okay. I imagine the stories are pretty still diverse in terms of what's erotic, because power play and some of that idea of forced sex, even though it isn't actually forced in our minds. I mean, that's erotic still to a lot of people, male and female.
Right. And
so I'd imagine that you still see a breadth of things in these literature, right?
Anything you can think of, just like, there's subgenres. So there's like fantasy, contemporary, historical, and then there's different, I guess, kinks, so to speak, right? Some people like, there's a book I haven't read, but has been recommended to me, is Asking For It by Lila Pace. And it's about a woman who has rape fantasies. Like, that's one of her fantasies she's always wanted to try. And she meets someone who will help her fulfill this fantasy, but it's all very consensual. And I think to me, that's important. Like, no matter what the fantasy is for the characters and the reader, like, as long as there's discussion about consent, I think that's healthy. That's healthier, right?
Right. So you mentioned, like with a heterosexual romance where the guy is going to go down on the woman, but is there diversity in the kinds of couples and gender diversity, and like, how has that evolved, and how does that fit into your subscription?
Oh, that's a really great question. There is diversity, but not as much as there should be. Right. And historically, there's been a lot of gatekeeping by publishers and reviewers against queer books. And you see more of them now because indie publishing or self-publishing is big in the romance industry, because a lot of those writers are not able to be published by traditional publishers because the publishers say, well, that won't sell. Nobody wants to read about two women or two men falling in love. So they just decide, like, I'm just going to publish it because the story needs to be out there. Mm-hmm. And in the past few years in the publishing industry, there's been more outcry for more diverse romances from everybody, from the publishers. And it's a matter of knowing where to look to find them. And for me, that's always been an issue. So actually, just recently, I launched a new box, an offering called the Bawdy Quickie, and it's a monthly box. Our regular box is seasonal, but our monthly box is only going to feature diverse romances. So it's a diverse romance, and then I pair it with an erotic toy.
Okay. And where are you finding all this? I mean, you must be spending, I can see, the listening audience can't see this, but we have our cameras on, and you've got a huge stacks of books behind you.
I do have a huge stack of books. I literally cannot read all the books that I want to read in time. Yeah. I get a lot of suggestions, recommendations from friends, romance book bloggers. Like Love in Panels is a romance book blog that focuses a lot on diverse romances of all types, gender pairings, sexuality spectrums, racial diversity. So they cover a lot. And then I have friends that I talk to, and then I'm also friends with a lot of authors of color and diverse authors, and I kind of see what they're doing and see how it fits, because the books I feature are usually what we call high heat in the industry. So there's explicit sex on the page, as opposed to like they kiss and it fades to black. Yeah. That's what I like to read, and that's what my audience likes to read. So that's what I look out for. But there's, no matter what you like on the spectrum of how explicit the books are, there are diverse romances out there.
Okay. And so how do you pick what goes in there, both the story and the product?
Oh my goodness. I think it's an art form.
Yeah, I'm sure it's evolving as you're getting into
evolving.
this business.
So, right now I pick books that I like, and I think that there's room for discussion because we do hold a virtual book club in our Facebook group for each.
Oh, okay.
And so I want the book to be able to bring up, have, good things, topics for our community to chat about. And then it's about like, can I find a product to pair with either the sex scenes in the book or the emotional arc that the characters go through, something that ties it in. I kind of joke like they're like wine pairings, but a lot more fun.
So it's not just a random this sex toy with this book. I mean, you've got a reason for pairing these two things.
Right. So our fall book is a historical romance by Sarah MacLean. It's called Wicked and the Wallflower. And there's this scene where they're sitting on this chair, and I guess in the time period, there's a chair that's built where the two people can sit and they're not looking at each other, but they can talk and hear. It's built so they can hear the other person, so it doesn't look improper, right?
Okay.
So they're in the secret garden, and he's talking to her. He ends up coming over and giving her oral, and so the toy I picked is called Little Hummer. So I don't know if you know this, like hummer can be slang for oral sex.
Okay.
Or an action you can give, like when you're giving oral sex, you hum, and it causes vibrations that can pass along to your partner.
Yeah.
So that's the toy that I chose, and there's a whole thing about the male character who he isn't a big fan of dark spaces. So the toy actually lights up. There's an LED light in it that lights up when you turn it on.
Okay.
So it just depends on the book and what's happening in the toy, but I want to tie them as closely together as possible.
Yeah. Hi, it's Jessa here, taking just a quick break. Thanks for listening so far. I wanted to let you know about the sex quiz that I've put together called How Healthy is Your Sex Life? I've taken a close look at the typical ways that I see couples get into trouble with sex, including avoidance, neglect, negativity, distraction, and boredom. And the free quiz will score your individual results based on these factors. And then I provide my recommendations and ideas, including my top 10 sex tips, which will help you make instant improvement. If you'd like to take the quiz and see how healthy your sex life is, you can do it right now at sexhealthquiz.com. So you mentioned the Facebook book group. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and then how else you're interacting with the audience. Like, what's the model bigger than just sending this lovely surprise box?
Sure. So my big goal with doing this is just to create a space where women can openly talk about romance books with sex in it, talk about sex, toys they like. I think in general, we don't always feel comfortable talking about those things in our personal spaces. Like right. I don't know about you, like when I meet a friend, like I have to like vet them to see, like, are they the type to talk about sex and vibrators? Or are we just going to talk about, like the weather? So the space is there for that. And it's open to anyone who wants to join. So you don't have to be a subscriber. And we, people will share like their current books they're reading, or if you're looking for a recommendation, like I'm looking for a book about men in kilts, that are sexy or whatever, and people will jump in and help out. And then we'll have conversation starters like, have you ever tried vibrating panties? Like, what's your experience? So it's just a way to kind of jumpstart the conversation and say, hey, this is fun. Like, we can talk about this stuff every day.
Right. And what are some of the sources that people could find erotic literature like this? You mentioned the Blogger. Are there other places you send people for more resources that, if they want more, they're going faster than a book a season, perhaps.
Right. Well, I do have members in my book group who read a lot. Like I have one person who reads 400 books a year.
Oh my gosh.
Which I'm lucky if I hit 100.
Yeah. You should outsource some of the reviewing, I suppose. Yeah.
So, that's why the group is great, because the members are also recommending books to each other.
Yeah.
And there are some major blogs out there. Smart Bitches Trashy Books is a great romance book blog. There is Smexy Books, so it's at SMEXY. And what else? Women of Color in Romance it's not a blog, it's a website that tells you all about books that are written by authors of color.
Okay.
And if you're a Twitter person, there's what we call Twitter Romancelandia. And people are always sharing recommendations about their favorite reads. And so if you find a few authors that you like and you follow them on Twitter, if they're active on Twitter, they will definitely share recommendations. And that's what I like about this space, is that people are really open about what they like and what they want to read, because they know that readers are so hungry for more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, I don't want to recommend other people's books because I only want you to read my book. Like, I don't ever get that sense. It's always like, oh my God, look at this book. It's coming out. It's amazing. Like, you have to read it.
I would imagine the whole, like you were saying, the whole self-publishing phenomenon must have just created so much more material. Like, I can almost imagine that you could have exhausted the romance novel genre before, but now there must be so many people entering it and bringing in their own voice and their own stories. And
and that's what makes it great. You can, if you want to read, like, you could name a topic or a kind of pairing, and there's probably a book for it. And I think that's also, a downside, is because you're not going to be able to read them all. I have a private chat group, and everyone's like, look at this book there's a Hanukkah romance anthology coming out, I think, next week. I forget what it's called. I think it's like, and I thought, oh my God, this sounds amazing. I haven't seen a lot of Hanukkah romances.
Yeah.
And so there goes my, to be read list, like, add another book to this list.
So what have you learned about the community? I'm wondering how much it's changed when you first had this idea to introduce it, sort of based on your own experience and your own enjoyment. How much has your understanding of the community changed over these few years? Has there been anything surprising to you about the audience?
What's surprising is that how many people really want to try sex toys in the bedroom, but they don't know where to start. And maybe, I think it's because I've been in the space for so long, I just thought, like, oh, well, this is what I will recommend. But they're not always ready to ask, even in our small Facebook group. They'll message me, or they'll send an email, and they'll say, like, my partner wants to try this, but I don't know where to start. Or people think that one particular type of toy is going to be great for everyone. I often get tagged in conversations, like, I'm looking for a new sex toy. Like, what should I try? And I say, well, it depends. Like, what kind of stimulation do you like? Like, because, I can say this rapid style toy might work great for one person, but it's not going to do anything for another one.
Right.
I try to give more personalized, if they're willing to share, right, the particulars, then I can say, well, if you like that type of stimulation, then, like, try XYZ toys.
Yeah. So it sounds like the romance novel, the erotic fiction is the easy part for people. Like, that's the entry, right? And
right.
The sex toy is wow, you get this chance to, introduce them to aids for pleasure that they might not have ever pursued.
Right. Especially if the characters use sex toys, because not every book we choose, the characters will be using sex toys. It's just kind of a stepping point to the conversation. Right.
And then what's your top concern, I guess, when you're choosing the sex toy to put out, or
Oh, goodness. So what I try to do is I try to keep a different toy, every box, so that people can try something new. It's a good way to kind of see what you like and don't like, right? But I also want to choose packaging that is women friendly. So, like, no, like, a half dress model on it, nothing that says, like, I don't know, like, clit liquor. Like, I want it to be just kind of non-intimidating and something exciting and fun to use. Those are big things for me. And of course, like, something that is of good quality that'll last them for a while, and not just a one-time use kind of product.
Right. And it sounds like, is your subscription geared towards heterosexual eroticism, or do you have a separate list for people that might want gay or lesbian, or anything else?
Well, so far our books have all been heterosexual, but with the new monthly box, Bawdy Quickie, I will be introducing different gender pairings.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's something for everybody, basically. Yes. Okay, great. Would you say, how can people find you? How can they subscribe? What does it cost? They probably are wondering that.
So they can go to bookworms.com, and our quarterly boxes are $39.95 a quarter, which is not bad. And you can get you get at least $50 worth of product in it, usually more. Okay. And then our monthly box is $27.95. And the first box will be shipping very soon, so they can sign up and get their first romances.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing this. I think it's going to be an interesting and an exciting opportunity for people.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question and answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.